Reality Fighter TV. In this video tutorial, I want to discuss and define 4 types of defenses that you can use in self-defense, street application purposes, as well as MMA sport application purposes. I also want to share with you what I feel are the most important principles that are going to play a big factor and role into what defenses are going to be a hierarchy use of effectiveness in street as well as in MMA. In other words, to the average person and to the untrained eye, the defenses I'm going to share with you, the techniques that I'm going to share with you, and the tactics I'm going to share with you seem to be very similar both for sport application and street application purposes. But they are entirely different, even though they do look physically the same to the untrained eye. There are very subtle details that are important to understand when you're practicing defensive skill sets. They're going to be practical for the street application and practical for MMA combat application. So let's get ahead and get into it. Okay, so there are 4 primary types of defenses that all defensive tactics and techniques can fall under one way or the other. Okay, regardless of the names of the techniques, the idea behind them, there are basically 4 types of defenses that you can use in both street application as well as MMA. Now, what I want to share with you is that applying them in the street is going to be a lot different in the approach than you would apply them in MMA. Okay, and the reason for being that is that there is a different psychological approach when it comes to self-defense situations as opposed to sport combat situations. Okay, the application, the technical application, and the mechanics in which you're trying to use these techniques are going to be modified or have to be modified in order for you to achieve maximum effectiveness. Okay, if you try to blend a sport defensive techniques into the street application, a lot of times what you have is a patchwork system in here where or patchwork techniques where you're trying to take some idea, that is kind of diametrically opposite in nature from another idea and weave a sewing needle and thread to them and try to create something. And the problem with is that in the street or in self-defense, the most important thing that needs to be addressed and analyzed and set up front for anybody who's practicing reality-based martial arts or reality-based skill sets for the street is that every skill set that you do has to be based on one factor, and that is the end result factor. The end result factor is defined as what's most important is that you survive this situation or this scenario with minimal amount of damage. Okay, so the end result is the first factor, as opposed to in sport. Okay, in MMA, the goal is to win. The goal is to win the round, to win the fight, minimize damage, right? And do the best you possibly can in here. Okay, but in the street, the real goal is survival and to try to escape death or severe injury. So the end result is the first factor that has to be addressed when it comes to defining the difference between defensive skill sets that are most practical, most important for the street, and most practical and most useful for MMA. Okay, I just discussed the first factor when it comes to addressing what is most important and the overall goal when it comes to defense skill sets for the street and for MMA. And the first factor I said was the end result. The second factor that plays a role in choosing a defensive selection for self-defense and MMA is going to be range, distance. Okay, so that is a huge difference when it comes to approaching a realistic defensive skill set for both of these applications. For example, in the street, range is something that you're not always going to be able to control. Why? Because of the environments that you're going to find yourself in, right? For example, in here, if I'm standing in a bathroom, all right, and I'm in the urinal, all right, there's not a whole lot of distance in there for me to function. Okay, I'm in my car and somebody comes up to me at the stoplight. Okay, someone breaks into my house. I'm laying in my bed. I'm in a crowded, concert or something like that. There's people all around me. There's always not a lot of room to move around. Okay, the environment, the ground in here. It could be slippery or raining out, it could be muddy, it could be rocky in here, and stability can become a factor. Okay, so range is a huge important one. In the street, most situations in the street occur at very close proximity, where somebody's right up in your face in here because either the altercation just happened to start here and here, or I didn't do something right. I let this person get in, encroach me and get in my kill zone. Okay. As opposed to MMA, right? The fight starts out, 30 feet away, in the octagon or the ring in here, and you're always in a ready position in here, always trying to keep your distance. So fighters right away off the bat are put into a position where they are at an optimal range to stay away and to kind of size their opponent up in here, right? In the street, obviously, you're not able to do that all the time, okay? So all defensive skill sets, whether it's for the street or whether it's for sport, should be based on what I call what's the third factor. And the third factor is worst case scenario. So let's talk about that. Okay, the third factor that plays a role in defensive selections for both self-defense and MMA is going to be worst case scenario. Worst case scenario versus best case scenario. All defenses that you choose, all physical techniques that you choose for the street should be based solely on worst case scenario first and foremost, and then branch out to best case scenario. Okay? And should be for MMA, but often that's usually not the case. For example, in the street, worst case scenario, somebody is standing this close to me. Okay? Worst case scenario in here, they're standing this close to me and they have a weapon hidden in their hand. Right? Something that is maybe necessarily not even a conventional weapon like a firearm or a knife, something you can't see. It could be a pencil. It could be the ring on their finger in here. It could be a lit cigarette they have, right? But something that they're going to use, right, to deploy the element of surprise on me, and I'm not ready for that. Okay. Worst case scenario here, it's 2 against 1. Multiple opponents is a huge factor when it comes to choosing the right defenses. Weapons, I mentioned that. It could be it's dark out, right? The environment plays a huge role in what the defenses that you're going to use for the street that are going to give you the widest variety of advantages in here and the minimal amount of disadvantages. Okay, so worst case scenarios, anything that you can think of in most probable situations, most probable and possible situations where you're at a disadvantage. Maybe you're a smaller person, this person is a larger person, so there's a disparity in force. Maybe they have training and you don't, okay? Maybe you've got health restrictions in here, right? So all defensive skill sets for the street especially, but also for MMA, should be based on approaching it from a worst case scenario, right? That's the third factor. So now that I mentioned kind of some of the primary factors in kind of choosing a defensive selection for both street application and for sport, let's go ahead and talk about the 4 types of defenses that every defensive skill set can be classified under. All right, there are 4 primary forms or types of defenses that all defensive skill sets, whether that's street application or sport application, can fall under. Okay, and within that, there are some variations of all those skill sets for both of those environments, for street and sport. Okay, and I want to go ahead and define the difference between the subtleties between them. So we're going to say the first type of defense that's very common to use is what we call blocking and parrying skills. Right? Now this is nothing new. Okay, but blocking and parrying skills are skill sets that are defined as actions that you're going to use, primarily your arms in here, to usually deflect precision techniques, precision skills that you're going to use to deflect incoming attacks that are coming, primarily into the biocomputer or coming into the central area of the body. In other words, these skill sets are require a high level of timing and precision, and they're only going to work under certain conditions. Okay, so blocking and parrying skill sets are basically where you see an incoming attack in here and you are deflecting these techniques in here. You are putting up a wall usually with one or more of your limbs, usually with one in here, into various gates of your body in here, right? So things can come at you down the center line. I can deflect things in here by kind of slapping them out of the way. or things can come around, right, coming around, you know, in the circular line here like this, and I can block things. So blocking is I can kind of intercept in here, I can block something coming down here, right, and parrying is I can kind of deflect the energy in here and kind of let it dissipate. So blocking and parrying is one of the first skill sets that we're going to discuss in here. Let's go on to the second skill set. Okay, I just discussed the first skill set briefly, blocks and parries. Okay, the second skill set that I want to define is what's called shielding. Okay, some people are going to look at this and call it covering. Okay, I call it shielding and not covering, but I'm going to define the difference here as we go through. Shielding is the idea that you, unlike blocking, where I'm trying to deflect in here and keep my distance in here like this. Okay, shielding is the idea that I'm unable to move and escape. Okay, that I'm going to have to stop or meet this force head on. In other words, I have no other choice. This is like the worst case scenario defense. I have no other choice. I have to meet this thing head on. This situation is right in my face in here, and I have to put up a wall or some kind of blockade in order to let this person, you know, smash his techniques into my skeletal structure in here. Or I can, you know, stop these things or ram something in here to kind of immediately cause damage. In other words, you are not trying to maneuver and get away in here like this, right? Like blocking and parrying and deflecting in here. Shielding does not take the timing and the amount of precision that blocking and parrying do. So for example, when I shield something in here, right, what I need to be able to do is I need to barely shut off the entire gate or the entire zone of where something's coming, right? So if something's coming right down the center in here, like right at my nose in here like this, assuming my hands are, you know, I have access to use my hands, what I need to be able to do is, you know, put something in the way in here like this and put my head, my biocomputer in a protected position in here, so when I take the impact in here, it doesn't slip through, okay? Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, everybody does that, boxing does that and that. And this is where the difference comes in between doing it for sport and doing it for street, okay? Now, in the street, you have no gloves, all right? And you have weapons, you have fingers, you have fingernails, okay? You have multiple opponents, and you have, more importantly, the element of surprise, and you don't always have the range, okay? So, in shielding for the street, the idea, the art form behind shielding for the street is something that you need to master in here. You have to understand the mechanics of what has to happen. You're not just putting your arms up in here like this, okay? As opposed to in MMA, what you'll see a lot with fighters, they'll try to bring the gloves up in here to protect their face and their jaw and keep their arms loaded here and protect their body here like this. And a lot of times what you happen, if you look at a lot of still images of fights, you'll see fighters reaching out in here doing stuff like this. They're flinching, they're pulling their head away, and they're getting clocked either around or through because they can't even see what's going on. So that is not shielding. That's what I call covering. It's just putting your arms up and flinching and literally disconnecting your perception and hoping for the best. Shielding is more of I'm actually watching the technique come in, and I'm literally putting my limbs using just enough movement in here to put the skeletal muscular structure or an area of my body that's less susceptible to injury, okay, putting it in the way just enough in here to kind of absorb, stop, and just let the person just slam and just nullify his techniques without avoiding and escaping, without losing my stance in here, okay? So it's not retreating and going backwards like this. That would be more footwork, okay? And it's not just covering here and just letting somebody pound on me for 5 minutes. Okay, this is not the rope-a-dope Muhammad Ali used to do, okay? This is a sudden transition from an emergency defense into an attack immediately in here, okay? So I kind of define this more as a more important skill set to learn overall, especially in the street when you are in very close quarters. If you're standing at point blank range in here and your hands happen to be down or someone's behind you on the side of you and someone throws a quick technique and you can't see it in here, your only chance maybe just to get your hands up in here and just put something in the way in here like this and still be able to see through your limbs just enough in here so you can fire a technique, an effective counterattack right back. Okay? So shielding is a very important and underutilized skill set in this kind of approach that needs to be addressed and is very effective, especially for the street and also for MMA. Okay? Unlike covering, where I can put my arms up and maybe take a shot in here. All right. What often happens is fighters put their arms up in here and someone just throws a technique and just wham! Their own fist just slams them in the face in here like this and causes a shock wave to the biocomputer, and from there they're overwhelmed. Okay? That is not shielding. Okay? So shielding is the idea of using a blockade or some kind of skeletal muscular structure, tight, transitional, momentary guard in here to either absorb, stop, maybe deflect in here, or to ram, right, your weapons into a person when you're not able to escape or evade. Let's go on to the next defense. Okay, the third defense is what's called body evasion. Now, body evasion is a skill set, a very high-level skill set that requires flexibility, it requires correct perception, and it also requires timing, like blocking. And body evasion is something that's often used a lot in sport application. There are different ways to evade techniques. Basically, body evasion is the idea of standing your ground in here like this without moving out of range and moving your head, usually your head, off the line of fire, whether that's ducking, whether it's slipping in here, whether it's snapping back in here like this, or rolling with a punch in here. It could be leg sliding or pulling my leg out of the way. A body evasion is the idea that you can see a technique coming very easily, and you're telling yourself, I don't need to block or shield in here. I can just move my head out of the way and hit this guy right back in here like this, or I can duck a punch in here and fire a technique in here. Body evasion can be used by itself. I can evade and then just escape, or it can be used in conjunction with countering in here, right? I can evade and then fire at the end of the evasion, or I can evade and then recover and then attack back in here. Body evasion is a very dangerous skill set if you don't have depending upon your level, your experience, your psychological approach, and also your opponent, right? Body evasion is very dangerous to do in the street. Why? Because in the street, I always go by the cardinal rule, is the person who hits first, fastest, and most almost always wins. In other words, in the street, never expect anybody to throw one punch. Always expect them to throw an infinite amount of strikes. Okay, as opposed to in MMA, because there's a lot more concern about losing in front of a crowd. There's a lot more of the ego involved in a performance in here. A lot of fighters, will throw one punch in here like this and step back and kind of see what happens in here and wait for you maybe to attack them. As opposed in the street, right? The most dangerous thing that happens in the street is someone just comes at you with a swarm of just artless attacks that come out of nowhere, right? And what's going to happen is you're going to flinch. And you're going to mistime the thing, right? So you're going to go like this in here, and all of a sudden, whack! Your head's in a position, your neck's in a position not to take a hit, and you didn't see it. And then the second one comes, and maybe you duck that one in here. But here comes 4 or 5 more, and guess what? Now you're off balance, and you're having to backpedal and use footwork in here to try to survive in here like this. And again, where are you doing this, right? Again, is this going to work in a close quarter situation where your back's up against the wall, or I'm sitting in a car or something like that? Okay, so this skill set is a very high-level skill set. And it can be utilized efficiently in the street, but normally I do not recommend that skill set to learn up front when you're starting out in here if you're talking about practical self-defense, okay? Think about it, your age in here, if you're 6 years old and you're studying self-defense, that's probably a skill set that's probably not the most important for you right now as a primary skill set to keep you safe and survive, right? In MMA and boxing, it's an important skill set to know because the combat action in sport combat is going a lot longer than it is in the street. Remember, in the street, I don't want to have to survive one strike. I don't have to survive any strikes. But in the street, I need to end this fight in a few seconds in here, or survive this thing and get the hell out of it. Versus in sport in here, I have to survive this thing, for 5-minute rounds in here like this, right? So there's a lot more action going on in sport than it is in street, all right? And in sport, fighters who have high level of striking training, skill training in here, right? Most of the time when they throw a technique in here, they're not going to be out of position in here. Some of them are, but they're usually going to try to throw a precision strike in here like this. So in body evasion is a skill set that can be used very well, because if I can keep a person at range and draw them in, and they throw a precision strike, I might be able to move just enough in here, right, to step in and hit them like this, but it has to be a strike that I can recognize, all right? And that's one of the disadvantages of body evasion, is that you may not be able to recognize it right off the bat. So in the street, someone just goes like this at me in here, right? And you play that back on video, you can't really tell what direction it took, such an artless action. And that's often what you find in the street, is very artless techniques that are very quick. They're goofy looking in here, right? They don't have any precision behind it, but they're effective because all they're trying to do is take a hard part of the body and just bam, and just hit you, you know, and cause damage, because they're trying to take you out. They're trying to kill you. So body evasion is the third skill set that, when used, you have to use it in such a way to where you are in control of your range, you are in control of your surroundings in here, and you better make sure that you're not dealing with somebody who's thrown a swarm of techniques that you can't time, especially if they're techniques that have all kind of unbroken rhythm, okay, and broken rhythm, right? That can get really tricky in here. So let's go on to the next defense. Okay, the fourth and final defensive form is called evasive footwork. And evasive footwork is a skill set that requires athleticism, and it requires environment, okay? So this is a very important skill set to have down in sport combat in here, okay? And I would use that, take advantage of it as much as I possibly can, because in the ring or the cage, it's a controlled environment. You know, I have mats, I got padded walls in here, there are rules and stuff, so if I slip and fall, there's no risk of me really hurting myself, okay? Other hand, very dangerous for the street, okay? Depending on where you're doing this in here, if it's 120 degrees on the asphalt in here like this, and you step back and fall, boom, on the ground in here, not only, you know, you're going to really hurt yourself, but now you've taken the fight down on the ground, is in the last place you want to be. Again, you may not have the physical health to move or something like that. You may not be, again, you're sitting down in a chair or something like that, and you're a boxer relying on footwork in here like this, right? You know, you may not be able to access that type of defense. But if you have the ability to do that, you have the tools, the resources to do that, evasive footwork can be very effective in here, because if I don't have to make contact with you, if I can just make you miss in here like this and still stay, you know, within my stance, or still stay in a functional fighting platform, that would be a great choice. I don't have to take any damage whatsoever in here. Unlike blocking or shielding, right? Even body evasion, you know, I can mistime it in here and still get and you know, get drilled with the punch. You know, if I don't roll with the energy and I meet it force on force. So body evasion, I would say, I would not recommend as a practical skill set to start utilizing right in the beginning of worst case scenario street defense. I would start instituting it, you know, as a student progresses in here. If you have to teach them kind of how to be more athletic, yeah, you know that may be something you can use as to help develop their attribute. But relying on it as a primary form of defense is very dangerous in here, right? You got to think again the range where you're doing this at in here. If someone's right in my grill here like this, that would be the worst defense to do, because by the time I go to back up in here, I'm hit right at the apex of the technique. I should be picking something else in here, like shielding or something like that, right? As opposed to MMA in here, right? I might be able to win the entire fight or avoid techniques just by moving around in here like this, okay? Now, where a lot of this gets exaggerated in MMA, a lot of fighters, they're very afraid to get hit, and they don't have necessarily the best perceptual awareness skills, and they have horrible blocking skills and no shielding skills whatsoever. A lot of times what happens is they overuse their footwork, and they run out of room to move. In other words, they waste a lot of energy, and you'll see them do things like this. So the guy comes out and throws a technique, and you'll see them jump out of the way like this. Even though they avoided the whole collision, right, just by doing that itself is kind of a sign that you're just, you're real leery about force on force. And also, it doesn't put you in a position to counter. So I just defend myself first, and then I gotta walk back in the range like we're sparring, and then we're gonna go again in here, okay? So if you're gonna utilize footwork, you want to use it just enough to be just out of range, right? Just move just a little bit using angles, okay? And I'm not talking about angles they do in MMA where they just move around left to right. That's not angular footwork in here. I'm talking about how to use angles, how to use footwork, you know, and usually when you use footwork, a lot of times you're going to use it in conjunction with body evasion, right? So if I'm standing here in a stance like this, I may step back and slip a punch and step over here with some tactical footwork, right, in order to hit you over here like this, right? Or I may come this way in here like this and then blow out this way, and hit you with an indirect attack coming, with a hook or something like that. So a lot of times footwork, when you're using it in conjunction with body evasion, but you're maintaining a functional stance where you're drawing the person out just enough to where they just quite aren't there, and for a moment they're in a position where they can't get back into a position of neutrality. Footwork is also going to work the best when you have a neutral stance or guard stance. So if you're standing leaning way here like this, in here, or you're off balance somehow, right, or in the street, maybe you're standing here like this, right, and you're trying to move in here, that's not going to work very well. You have to kind of have your legs, both legs set, you have to have your weight kind of equally distributed, and you have to be ready to read your opponent and move in any direction you can, assuming you have the environment. Okay? So, again, for the street, it could be used as an attribute to help develop somebody's attributes, or as a very tactical defense. In other words, there's a real reason to use this defense as opposed to using blocking or shielding or something like that. Okay? So now that I've kind of talked briefly about the 4 types of defenses that all defensive skill sets can come under, what I want to share with you is what I feel are the most important principles that play a role in any form of defense that you use, and talk more about picking those 4 types of defenses and the specifics in those 4 types of defenses that you may apply, and how you would apply them in the street based on range, based on where you are psychologically, based on experience, as opposed to and how they would apply them in MMA. So let's go ahead and talk about the important principles that I feel go hand in hand with these 4 different types of defensive skill sets that you may or may not already know or acquire or want to learn more. Let's take a look at that. Okay, I want to talk about some of the important principles that go into developing an effective defense when choosing the specific defense that you need for street as opposed to sport. Now, I want to start out by saying that when it comes to selecting defense, you want to use the right defense that's going to give you the widest variety of options based on the scenario, whether it's for street or for sport. Okay? So this is the first principle here is often very neglected, especially in MMA that I see. And that principle is maintaining your vision. Maintaining your vision is everything. If you can't see, you can't stop what's coming at you. Okay? And it's incredibly important if you're going to use a defense that has to be utilized in very close ranges. So for example, if you're going to use blocking or shielding, right, and I'm standing this close to somebody in here, right, and I got my hands, up in here like this, and they throw a quick surprise attack in here, and I flinch in here like this. I don't care how great these defenses are in practice, they are done as soon as you get hit in here, especially for the street. In the street, you have to be able to stop that initial attack. You don't have time for attack 2, 3, 4, and 5, etc. As opposed to MMA, because you have more time frame to get prepared, right? Range, right? You're ready and things like that. You can afford to kind of flinch a little bit, and even though you don't want to, and still get out of the way, right? So it also goes. So when you use whatever defense you're using, right? It's very important that you train to keep your eyes open, right? You specifically have to train perpetual drills of defense and go through each defense, blocking, shielding, right? Evasion, footwork in here, right? Whatever form it is, and practice repetitively, just like you practice your strikes, on not flinching or minimize that, and focus in on watching the person's actions. Look for the telegraphing, look for the cues that they're going to take action, right? So I feel this is incredibly important to really practice on keeping your eyes open as opposed to trying to pick a specific defense right up front that you think that you favor. All right? Start out with one defense at a time and really practice that. So if it's blocking, okay, blocking for the street, you need to make sure that you can intercept every single technique in practice. Because in the street, you want to stop, the initial one and hopefully, get to the hit here. I want to stop and fire and get out of there, right? In MMA, you may block one or two and then transition into something else like a takedown or something, or block in here and then move away, right? Because your opponent decides to stop, and take a break, or the round's over or something like that, or because there's rules, there's certain things they cannot do. So it's incredibly important that you focus on maintaining your vision no matter what form of defense that you are practicing, especially for the street, because the goal is to survive and stay alive. As well as MMA is to survive, right, and minimize getting hurt in here, right? But it's very important, irregardless, that you focus in on keeping your vision no matter what form of defense that you're using. Okay, another important principle is maintaining your hand position. Maintaining your hand position has to start from, usually it starts from your guard stance in here, right? So for MMA purposes, because you're in a ready fighting stance in here like this, whatever stance you're in here, it's important that you start from a position of conception, right? Conception in here, and whatever form of defense you use, if it's blocking, if it's shielding, if it's evasion, if it's footwork and moving, that your hand position always stay in the right position so you can access other forms or other secondary forms of defense, right? So when it comes to MMA, often what I witness a lot is a lot of fighters have no idea where their hands are, or their hands start here like this and they throw a punch in here and then their hands are down here and they have no defensive awareness, right? The strike comes back and they just take it on the face, they block with their face, right? Or they have very horrible blocking skills, right? So I have yet really see MMA fighters really perform good blocking skills repetitively in here and maintain their vision and maintain their stance. They're usually getting out of position, they're flinching and they're going like this because their fears of survival is kicking in. So they're taking they're substituting gross motor skill actions for finite motor skills, right? So you have to maintain your hand position. Also, maintaining your hand position means that you need to have a guard stance that allows you to access both limbs in one action in here, okay? So if you're adopting a guard stance in here where you're standing sideways or something like this, so one hand is down in here like this, right? And especially if you do this for the street, right? If I'm standing here in the street with my hands down in here like this, right? I need to get my hands up in here immediately. Now, if I can't get my hands up in here, because this is a very realistic scenario where you may not get your hands up in here, but you're in the process of going into some kind of confrontation management in here, you need to make sure that your hand position gets up and manages the combat immediately in here. So you have to have access to both sides of your body in here, and also train them to be relatively ambidextrous in here. As opposed to MMA, because you're always in a ready stance, and then what happens is if you get into an exchange in here and you separate, you can get into your favorite stance in here again and start going, well, I'm going to pick my left hand again for the 5th time in here because I really like that. I really like my hand to block or something like this and counter like this, as opposed to the street, because it's always sudden death and because it's always based on the element of surprise. And you don't have time, you may only be able to access, one side of your body in here. So you need to be proficient in both left and right sides of your body. And if you have to find yourself using any form of blocking or shielding here, when you do train into those skill sets, that you constantly get your hand position back. So if you're starting here from a ready platform in here like this, and you go into a block or a parry, that you block, maintain your hand position, block, maintain your hand position, block, parry, block, 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 and do that repetitively and get your hands back into a template to where that you always start from and return from in here. All right. In the street, right, the same thing, except for the same thing applies. But in the street, again, the idea is to not stop 4 or 5 strikes. Worst case scenario, again, you have to do that, but hopefully that we stop one attack in here and hit back in here, right? Or if I have to apply a shielding concept in here, is my hands are up or somewhere in here, somewhere in that vicinity, I go into the shield, I perform the shield, and I come out of this thing, and then I strike in here, or I strike, and I get maintained back to a shield in here like this. So a lot of fighters may, a lot of fighters in MMA may stop one attack, and then their hands are gone in here like this. Okay. So second principle is you must maintain a hand position that gives you the ability to defend from both sides of your body relatively easily in here. Let's go on to the next one. Okay. The next important principle to maintain an effective defense when it comes to for the street or when it comes to MMA, and again, this goes for all forms of defense in here, shielding, blocking, evasion, footwork, is you need to maintain your center line. Now, maintaining your center line means that you need to keep your opponent in front of you with a guard stance in here, all right, not just your hand position, but your body position in here, where you have the ability to get into action immediately, okay? It's very important in the street that no matter where you find yourself in, unless I'm jumped, out of the bushes or something in the middle of the night in here, I need to make sure that I face my adversary directly in here like this, and I put my body into a position, whatever side I decide to adopt in here like this. I may not always be able to choose. I may have to transition into a position as I'm doing confrontation management, but I put my body into a position in here that I both of strength and power and accessibility here. Again, I want to be able to access both sides of my body, but if I stand here and I adopt a position where my arms are, let's say, on the center line of my body, you often see stances where their feet are standing here on a tightrope like this. Even though I'm facing you, let's say I'm facing the camera, which is my opponent here, my limbs are not in a position where I can access all different gates of my body in here, right? If I have to transit, if I'm standing here with my hands like this, let's say folded in here like this, right? And even though I'm facing you directly in here, if I have to deal with something over here, I can't, it's going to take too much time to turn and face this person, even though that's likely a reality. So in the street, you need to adopt stances in here that allow you to access, right, and face the person here if you can already. In MMA, you're already facing your adversary, hopefully, in here like this, and usually people don't get off here to the flanks. In the street, you're dealing with multiple opponents. You're dealing with the element of surprise again, so it could be stalking you or something, or it could be a burglary or something like that, a robbery. They jump out of nowhere and they come get you in here like this, and you don't have time to turn, square off, and face the person here. But irregardless of that, you need to be able to directly put your body in a position of strength and power on center line. That means you want to be relatively square to your opponent in here, with a little bit of what I would say a little bit of offset in here, where I still reach both sides of my body in here like this. I need to maintain a drive leg in here, and a drive and brace leg where I can push off the earth and brace for force in here. I definitely don't want to be sideways, leaning away in here like this. Or even though I am facing you in here, I get plowed over in here like this because wasn't ready for that charging attack. Or what happens a lot is when people choose defenses like footwork only, right? Or body evasion, they seem to put their body kind of out of position, and because they can rely on this in here. So they're picking a certain defense based on favorite move or their attribute. And you can do that as long as the environment allows you to do that, and you know exactly what your opponent's going to do. But in the street, because you are dealing with unknown situations, if you blade off for whatever reason in here like this too much, or adopt some kind of guard or hand position in here where you're not ready to deal with force, or you're not ready to deal with an attack coming a certain way, you can't access those forms of defense. So if my arms are sitting down like this, right, I can certainly block in here, but it takes much longer to do that, when I should be having a position where my hands are up in here where I can come in like this, right? Or maybe my hands are up in here, but my feet are turned sideways, or my body's a little crooked or something like that in here. right? Again, you got to take into account a person's going to try to impose their will on you and come at you with everything they have. So you need to be able to make sure that you face your adversary and keep them in front of you in here like this, and not crossing your legs in here or having a stance to where it looks like you're ready, but you're really in a really passive position. Sometimes you see that in MMA where their legs are locked out and the guy comes flying out in here and they can't move and they get clocked before they even, they can even react. Okay, so hands up, square to your adversary, knees bent in here like this, strong base of support, ready to move if you possibly can in here and access both sides of your body. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, the last principle that's important for any defense to be more efficient, whether it's MMA or street, is maintaining the flow, is flowing with whatever the energy gives you. Now this means that you need to be able to be proficient in any form of defense, any of those 4 forms, right? So you need to learn how to transition from blocking to footwork, from evasion to blocking in here, to shielding, right? To parrying in here like this, to stepping back, footwork, okay? Often, a lot of times in MMA, a lot of fighters try to rely on one form of defense only to solve all their problems. So for example, again, like I mentioned earlier in the videos, you see a lot of fighters, they'll try to move away, just use footwork and jump out of the way every time, right? And then step back in a range and hopefully they'll get their opponent to try to strike them back, and then they may counter. So a fighter often runs all the time out of the way because he's got the environment to do it, right? And he's got the time frame to do it, right? In the street, right, you're not going to be able to do that all the time, right? So you need to be able to flow, you need to be able to flow with what's happening to you. And it's very important in the street because in the street you have seconds, right? So in the street, right, if someone throws a quick punch at me in here, I have to shield in here like this, and they drop, then they shield in the upper gate, and all of a sudden they drop down to tackle me in here like this. I need to be able to transition into something here immediately in here, to whether I sprawl or I shove a ram shield in here like that, right? Or maybe I get caught off guard in here and I block in here and I move my head offline because at the last moment I saw it, like the block kind of got there, but I still wasn't quite sure what the heck that was, so I got to move my head offline and then step it back in here, something like that, right? Or maybe, I'm in confrontation position in here like this, and you throw a kick at me in here, and let's say I have to roll with the kick, and I take it in here like this, and you throw a punch, then I got to kind of weave under the way in here, and then move. So I need to be able to practice all those forms of defense again, separately, and then learning how to do perpetual defense with different types of training partners and have them strike it different ways, so I get comfortable reacting to the external energy as opposed to just picking a form of defense that I think is fun to do, or I'm effective because I've won 6 fights in the UFC like that, right? Now the question, really, one of the other questions that people are going to ask: what is the most efficient defense for the street, and what's the most efficient defense for sport? Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about that and define what I feel are the most important ones to learn for the street, as opposed to what's most important to learn for sport. Okay, now that I've gone through the 4 types or 4 forms of defenses that all defensive skill sets can be categorized under one way or the other, as well as some of the important principles that make effective defense up, okay, whether it's street or MMA. What I want to finish off with here is talking about what defenses are the most important to learn for the street right up front, as opposed to learning for MMA. Well, in my opinion, because of the street is a lot more dangerous because of weapons, multiple opponents, environments, element of surprise, psychological approach is a lot different in here, right? And what's important is the end result matters. I believe for most practical skill sets, for most practicality, for most situations and most people, the most practical, important skill sets to learn right up front are blocking, okay, and shielding. And why? Because worst case scenario, again, you are in close proximity, you're in this person's kill zone, and you can't back up. If you can back up and escape, then that's a best case scenario. If you can do that right up front, then do it, okay? But worst case scenario, you can't move in here, and you are cornered and you need to take action immediately, and you need to have skill sets that are easy to apply in any environment. Stuff that you're going to retain very easily without a whole lot of training. And those skill sets are going to be blocking and shielding skill sets. Okay? Now, blocking and shielding skill sets are very important for MMA, and they're often neglected and not utilized at all. They are very important as well. All right? But what's also important is MMA is that they can utilize any forms of those defense. Because of the range fluctuation, MMA is happening so differently, right? It's, you know, they're out here at long range, the guy throws a kick, and immediately they're in close range and grappling. Is that you need to be able to transition from any forms of those defenses, okay? That's what maintaining the flow principle, or flowing with the situation. In the street, using evasion, using footwork, again, I mentioned earlier, those are high-level skills, okay? And those should be done for tactical reasons, okay? I would not recommend to be learning that right up front as a primary form of defense. Because again, where are you applying this? So I'm standing this close again in here, and you think you're going to slip a punch when someone just goes boom like this in here. I think again, the chances of you seeing that are probably not likely to happen. There's so many things caught up. Fear, it's dark, we're in a bar, there's crazy lights, it's loud, right? You're going from a happy, passive, emotional state to what the heck is going on in here. And these skill sets in here require, again, a lot of athleticism, right? Moving your head, got a flexible back, flexible neck, right? And a lot of MMA fighters can't do it very well either, right? They're too rigid in here, right? Or they just don't train it very much. They can do it in practice, but in reality, they just have to react and slip and boom like this, or move over here like that, and still be in a functional fighting platform. A lot of times, you know, it's not the easiest thing to do. So I would recommend for the street that you learn shielding and blocking skills, you know, right up front, and transition into more tactical skills for specific reasons, right? Shielding and blocking skills you can use anywhere. I could be sitting in my car and someone could throw a punch from them here, and I could shield, right? I could be standing this close to somebody with my hands in here, and I could shield and shield my body. I can shield high, I can shield low. I can stop a tackle in here. I can stop a weapon coming in, right? Someone swings a bat in here like this, right? I can take it on my arms, right? Rather than taking it on my face. You know, I could block a weapon coming in like this, right? As far as the evasion or footwork in here, footwork is not going to work, or evasion, very dangerous to do right here, right? If you've got a barrier, physical barrier behind you in here, right? Footwork, you know, what happens if I'm standing here and there's a cactus behind me I didn't realize in the street, boom, right? I trip over it, right? As opposed to the ring, the cage, you don't have to worry about that, right? You slip and fall, you fall in the padding, right? You're not falling on asphalt, right? You know, there's not somebody behind you, there's not multiple opponents, right? So evasion skill sets and footwork skill sets are much more tactical in nature, need to be done for a specific reason against, you know, techniques that are very precision and very specific. Like someone throws a rear cross punch in here like this, I might be able to slip it in here because I can see it come easily, as opposed to the street, someone throws a wheel and just a wild punch out of nowhere, right? Their hands are down, I can't see it, they're standing here like this, and they just go boom out of nowhere like this, right? You may not even get your hands up to shield or block, you may just get a piece of it in here. So it's very important to train shielding and blocking skills in reactive scenarios, reaction training type of training, where you're trying to deal with the element of surprise, right, and kind of taking some of the confrontation out of it a little bit, and kind of introducing that kind of towards the, as they get more experience, just get them understanding this, can they see this thing coming? Can they see a telegraph coming? Can they watch a person without getting focused on their eyes and see this coming and see this coming in here like this, right? So I would recommend shielding, blocking skills are more important for the street to learn right up front. What's important to learn for MMA is all of them. They are all important because of the range fluctuation again, okay? So often a lot of MMA fighters just get overwhelmed on the ground, or someone comes at them and just starts going after them with all kinds of punches, and they have no answer. You see them out here, reaching out here like this, no blocking skills. So shielding and blocking skills are very important for those guys in here. Plus also evasion and footwork, because again, they're going 5-minute rounds. So they're taking a lot of punishment, right? In the street, I'm minimizing the punishment in here, right? In MMA, I'm taking a lot of punishment. So if I keep getting beat on, eventually my body starts to shut down, okay, by nutrition. So footwork and evasion skills are very important for MMA, because if I can avoid your energy in here, like I said earlier, that would be great. I move out of the way and then I counter you in here like this. And I use shielding and blocking skills as kind of more ways to keep me alive, and also for like more sudden, sudden worst case scenarios, okay? Shielding and blocking skills, definitely for worst case scenarios, okay? Street and sport. And body evasion and footwork skills are more best case scenarios when I got time to set this thing up and prepare for something coming in, okay? So I hope you found that video informative. If you do, please give it a like, comment on it, share it with your friends, and don't forget to check out my playlist that I have on different topics, very specific topics for people who are MMA, MMA interests in here. There's a wide variety of skill sets and ideas that I offer that are very innovative in my opinion. Again, if you're a new subscriber, thank you for watching in here. And again, keep on the lookout for more tutorials coming up here in the near future. And thank you again. Take care.